Welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today. As a modern CEO, I'm constantly, and I mean constantly, searching for frameworks that actually work when it comes to resolving deep, toxic organizational conflicts. Not the superficial stuff, but the really ingrained systemic issues. Today, we're going to look at something entirely unique. We are structuring this explainer as a reflective internal memo for modern leaders, drawing on a fascinating allegorical text. We're going to learn how to heal deep organizational wounds using the incredibly calm, observant strategies of Vassago, a figure known in this story as the Prince of Hidden Things. Okay, let's dive right into this and see how this kind of ancient, allegorical wisdom can directly cure our very modern corporate headaches. Here is our agenda for today. First, we'll be diagnosing the War of Crowns, then mapping hidden corporate dependencies, followed by the art of neutral inquiry. After that, we'll cover pausing for systemic repair, the hearing of the lower flame, and finally, actionable shifts for leaders. Section 1. Diagnosing the War of Crowns. The hidden wounds of toxic leadership. In our source material, we observe an allegorical, highly toxic corporate environment. Picture a C-suite completely at war with itself. The leaders, representing different departments, are just fighting over precedence, honor, command, and the future order of the company. It's a classic scenario where the high ranks fight for status, the mid ranks just fight for survival, and the low ranks feel like entirely disposable tools. Meanwhile, there's this destructive whistleblower named Valac who is exposing their hypocrisy, basically leaking fragments of truth just to burn the whole system down. It is pure chaos. But into all this noise steps Vassago. Now, what's fascinating is that he doesn't bring an army or a bigger crown. There's a really stark contrast in leadership styles at play here. First, consider Bael's approach, which represents your standard, rigid, top-down management. You know the type. Bael demands unquestioning loyalty and incredibly quick bows. When something goes wrong, Bael views any pushback as an insult, and he uses that insult as his primary evidence of insubordination. It's management by ego. Then we have Vassago's approach. As a modern CEO adopting these techniques, this is the exact shift we absolutely must make. Vassago uses incredible, almost agonizing patient observation. He uncovers hidden wounds. Where Bael sees an insult, Vassago looks closer and sees fear. Where others see resistance or rebellion, Vassago sees a hunger that is simply afraid of emptiness. He attempts to solve the conflict, not by dominating it, not by winning it, but by calmly revealing the hidden wound inside every single faction without jumping to an immediate judgment. It is a complete paradigm shift. Section 2. Mapping hidden corporate dependencies. Looking beneath the organizational chart. Our next step in systemic healing is realizing that the official structure, the one you show the board, is rarely what actually keeps the organization functioning. War draws borders above ground, right? But wisdom studies the tunnels below. We have to look beneath the glossy organizational chart to find the map beneath the map. Doing so brilliantly illustrates the true corporate dynamic. Think about the official narrative. There's Bael's grand first name doctrine, Paimon's brilliant scholarly ledgers, Belial's complex debt courts, and Asmoday's incredibly productive iron workshops. It sounds great on paper, but Vassago bypassed the executives. He asked the mid and low ranks about corrupted ledgers and ruined roads, and by doing that, he built a map of hidden dependencies. It turns out Bael's grand doctrine relies entirely on unrecognized scribes just trying to keep the basic infrastructure running. Paimon's high-level strategic wisdom, it depends completely on frontline messengers who might not even understand the strategy they are executing, but who carry the actual weight of it. Belial's sophisticated favors need low-level clerks to remember the actual messy debts the court wants to ignore. And Asmoday's massive production targets, they are only hit by anonymous hands and silent carriers of coal. The entire War of Crowns is literally being held up by those who own no crowns. By acknowledging this, we reveal how unacknowledged invisible labor actually holds up the entire executive suite.
Which brings us to this incredibly profound truth. A roller who depends on others is not diminished by admitting dependence. In the modern corporate world, our ego often mistakes dependence for humiliation. We think if we admit we need our team, we look weak. But that's entirely backwards. We can identify these hidden dependencies in our own departments by looking for the people whose essential labor is called loyalty, simply because fair payment, proper titles, or actual recognition would be inconvenient for the company budget. When you rename someone's uncompensated extra hours or their weekend stress as just being a team player or loyalty, you aren't receiving loyalty, you are consuming it. As leaders, we absolutely must make the hidden cost of pretending we stand alone visible. That is step 1 of real healing.
Section 3. The art of neutral inquiry. Reducing defensiveness in high-pressure meetings. So, how do we uncover all of this hidden reality without starting a massive fire? We move to the art of neutral inquiry. To navigate really tense team discussions, leaders have to deploy this art to bypass executive defensiveness. The right question can enter a fortress that no corporate mandate can ever breach. Instead of launching accusations that just make every executive's throne taller and their defensive walls thicker, Vassago sends 3 perfectly neutral questions to every faction. The first is, what do you fear losing if the conflict actually resolves? This is a brilliant way to reduce defensiveness in high-pressure executive meetings. Let's be real, often a leader is subconsciously fighting to maintain a conflict because the state of emergency justifies their budget, their increased headcount, or their unquestioned authority. If the war ends, they lose their leverage. Asking what they fear losing completely neutralizes the attack and targets the underlying anxiety directly. The second question cuts even deeper. What do you fear revealing if the war pauses? This prompts leaders to admit the internal chaos, the broken processes, or the coerced debts they have been actively hiding behind the urgency of the conflict. In a corporate setting, urgency is so often the best camouflage for incompetence. If the fire drills stop, if everyone just takes a breath, people might look around and see that the actual day-to-day operations are a complete mess. This question forces that realization into the light, gently but incredibly firmly. It asks, what mess is this crisis allowing you to ignore? And the third question, this is the blade that uncovers the hidden corporate workforce. Whose labor has your banner called loyalty because payment would be inconvenient? By asking this neutrally without a tone of judgment, you are validating all those people who are so tired of being invisible. When Vassago sent these questions out, the high ranks absolutely hated them. They called them insolent, politically dangerous, you name it. But the mid and low ranks, they answered. They felt seen. They confessed how things actually worked when the executives weren't looking. So let's translate this into a practical 3-step workshop for managers who want to practice active listening and neutral inquiry. Step 1, ask neutral questions instead of making accusations. Strip the emotion and the blame out of your voice. Step 2, withhold immediate judgment or publication of the answers. This is huge. When Vassago got these explosive confessions from the lower ranks, he didn't leak them like the whistleblower Valac did. He held them, which leads to step 3, treat hidden answers as patients that need care, not weapons for attack. If secrets are opened too quickly, they bleed out. As a CEO, when your team finally trusts you enough to tell you the messy truth, you cannot immediately use it to punish them or reorganize their department. You have to hold it safely. Information and secrecy in leadership must be used to heal the system, not to manipulate the players. Let's move to a concept that builds right on this, perfectly captured in this powerful quote. Accuracy precedes hierarchy. Without it, rank becomes costume. Let's do a little role-play scenario right now to make this concrete.
Imagine you are a mid-level manager trying to resolve a serious dispute with a rigid, Bael-like executive. This executive is demanding you just follow orders because of their title, regardless of the reality on the ground. Instead of fighting their authority, which never works, you calmly state the facts of the broken supply chain or the failing code base, and you say, accuracy must come before hierarchy. You don't raise your voice. You just present a mirror containing the real repair records and the real hidden dependencies we talked about earlier. By doing this, you prove that truth is not an act of rebellion. You are not trying to usurp their crown. You are simply trying to make sure the floor beneath their throne doesn't collapse. It changes the entire dynamic, from a power struggle to a reality check.
Section 4. Pausing for systemic repair. The still forge. Next, we absolutely must address the danger of confusing production with purpose. This is a massive systemic issue in modern hustle culture, perfectly illustrated by Asmoday's restless, hungry forge in our story. Asmoday's workshops can outbuild anyone, but his hunger is terrified of emptiness. Sound familiar? We just keep building to avoid looking at what's broken. To counter this, Vassago demands what he calls a still forge, a temporary, absolute pause on new production. For a modern tech company or a production team, this means instituting a true code freeze or a feature pause. You stop launching. Instead, you focus entirely on repairing roads, healing rooms, and archives, which in our world means paying down massive technical debt, fixing broken communication lines, and updating completely outdated documentation. You establish neutral routes protected by all factions so cross-departmental collaboration can happen safely without turf wars. Ultimately, you have to prove that an organization can survive without constantly manufacturing new crises or new outputs. You ask the corporate appetite to prove it is not a slave to itself.
But, and this is a big but, leaders must remain incredibly neutral and vigilant here. When you pause for repair, you will almost certainly face the sabotage of the pause. In the story, when the pause begins, the first neutral road is burned, and it looks like a coordinated attack by all the rival executives. But Vassago looks closer, with that calm observation, and realizes it wasn't the High Kings at all, and it wasn't the cynical whistleblower. It was frightened middle managers who staged conflicts to protect their hidden incompetence. Think about it. When peace and a pause happen, those who profit from confusion and noise feel deeply threatened. War allows them to hide their inefficiency behind the veil of urgency. I couldn't do the paperwork. We were putting out fires. So as a leader, when you call a pause and mysterious fires suddenly start breaking out across your organization, do not chase the loudest footprint. Look for the people whose relevance is threatened by peace.
Section 5. The hearing of the lower flame. Receiving feedback without judgment.
To bypass this sabotage and to heal the deep, lingering disengagement among the frontline staff, an organization must host what Vassago calls a hearing of the lower flame. This is the ultimate guide to facilitating an honest feedback session without assigning blame. Here are the specific steps to facilitate this hearing. First, place the lamps low. Symbolically and literally, no leader sits higher than the witnesses. In your all-hands meeting, get rid of the stage. Get off the podium. Erase the physical hierarchy. Second, frontline workers must speak their truth before executives are allowed to answer. Let the road keepers, the junior devs, the sales associates explain how things actually run day to day. Third, and I promise you this is the hardest part for any executive, myself included, you must enforce absolute silence from leadership. As a CEO, you and your C-suite must practice receiving truth without instantly turning it into a new policy, a defensive excuse, or a weapon. You don't try to clarify the financial language. You don't interrupt to retrain the messenger. You just sit there in the agonizing, necessary patience of listening. This restraint, this
painful act of just listening to the lower flame without reacting creates what Vassago calls the first veil of peace. Now, understand, it's not a permanent utopia. It's not a magic fix. It is a temporary covering placed over an exposed, bleeding organizational wound so the corporate body can decide whether it actually wants to live. It is an environment where conflict is delayed, not by fear, not by a rigid top-down HR mandate, but by the careful, neutral revelation of the truth. Beneath the veil, ambition still breathes, the company still has goals, but the realm has learned to hesitate. It has learned to listen before it strikes.
Section 6. Actionable shifts for leaders. Healing the hidden wounds.
Okay, let's bring all of this together. Let us summarize these findings into a definitive internal memo of actionable behavioral shifts for modern executives. If you want to adopt the calm, observational tone of the Prince of Hidden Things to heal your teams, here is exactly what you need to do. First, acknowledge hidden dependencies. Get out of the boardroom and map who actually does the work, not just who holds the fancy title. Second, replace your defensive accusations with Vassago's 3 neutral questions. When tensions run high, ask your team what they fear losing or revealing if the conflict actually ends. Third, mandate pauses for repair. Build your still forge. Stop the endless feature shipping and fix your internal roads and technical debt. Fourth, host a hearing of the lower flame, where leadership is strictly forbidden from answering immediately. Learn the excruciating patience of listening without defending your ego. And finally, value accuracy over hierarchy at all times to prevent rank from becoming costume. Truth is the only foundation that can actually hold the crowns up in the long run. As we adopt the calm observation of the Hidden Counsel and begin to truly heal the systemic issues that cause our employees to disengage, I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought. On the final night of the pause in our story, Vassago receives a message from Valac, the cynical whistleblower. It asks a question we must all ask ourselves as leaders. What will you hide when peace becomes your banner? It's a chilling thought, right? If corporate peace and harmony become just another performance, just another KPI we pretend to hit so we look good to the board, what new, darker truths will you bury to maintain that illusion? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep observing, keep questioning your own motives, and start healing your organization from the bottom up.